On the evening of January 31st, 2026, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was spending time with family. There was nothing unusual about the evening, nothing that suggested investigators would soon launch one of Arizona's most closely watched missing person investigations. To those around her, it seemed like an ordinary night. The kind of night people rarely remember, until something changes everything. By the following day, Nancy would be gone. No explanation, no confirmed sighting, no indication of where she went. Before her disappearance became national news, Nancy Guthrie was known as a mother, grandmother, and longtime Arizona resident. Friends described her as independent. Family members described her as caring. And those closest to her insist that disappearing without contact would have been completely out of character. Later that night, she returned home. At the time, nobody knew those final hours would become the focus of a major investigation. Investigators would later spend months attempting to reconstruct every minute of what happened after Nancy arrived home. As midnight passed, the neighborhood became quiet. Streetlights illuminated empty roads. Most residents had gone to sleep. But sometime during the early morning hours, something happened. Something investigators believe may hold the key to the entire case. One of the most significant developments involved security camera footage recorded near Nancy's property. Authorities later released images showing a person moving near the residence. The individual appeared to be wearing dark clothing and concealing their identity. For investigators, the footage immediately raised difficult questions. Who was this person? Why were they there? And were they connected to Nancy's disappearance? As family members attempted to contact Nancy, concern quickly began to grow. Calls went unanswered. Messages received no response. Hours later, concern became fear, because those who knew Nancy best understood something important. This wasn't normal. What began as concern among relatives soon became an active missing person investigation, and the search for answers officially began. At that moment, nobody knew that months later, Nancy Guthrie would still be missing. When family members could not reach Nancy, concern quickly escalated. This was not someone known for disappearing without explanation. Something felt wrong, and those closest to her knew it. Hours passed. Calls continued. Messages remained unanswered. The silence became impossible to ignore. Soon, relatives decided to check on Nancy personally. What they discovered would immediately trigger alarm. Inside the residence, investigators would later identify evidence suggesting that Nancy had not simply left voluntarily. As investigators processed the property, the case began changing from a missing person investigation into something much more serious. Evidence recovered from the residence raised significant concerns for investigators. Questions multiplied. Answers remained scarce. Authorities increasingly focused on the possibility that Nancy had been taken against her will. The investigation was no longer limited to finding a missing person. It had become a search for the truth. As public concern grew, federal investigators joined the case. The FBI became actively involved. Resources expanded. Additional personnel were assigned. The search intensified. Authorities appealed directly to the public for information. Even the smallest clue could prove critical. Tips began arriving from across the country. Most led nowhere, but investigators examined every lead. The reward fund continued to grow. Family members hoped that someone, somewhere, knew something important. One of the most discussed pieces of evidence involved surveillance footage recorded near Nancy's home. Authorities released images showing a person moving near the property during the overnight hours. Investigators have not publicly identified the individual. Yet the footage remains one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. Months later, questions still remain. Who was the person captured on camera? What did they know? And could they hold the key to solving the mystery? As investigators continued searching for answers, a new lead would soon emerge. An anonymous tip, a possible burial site, and a development that would send search teams far beyond Arizona.